Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. And on behalf of everyone here, thank you for your time this afternoon, and also for the hospitality that Filipinos show at an event like this. I've been in your country now for the last 2 weeks, travelling in a lot of places, and the hospitality and the friendliness is always the same. So thank you as host.
I hope you had a lot of fun.
I had a lot of fun, probably too much fun. Let's start with APEC, Mr. President. Here we are on the eve of the CEO Summit and, of course, the Leaders Summit. This is a gathering of the most important people from the business community, from the political community globally. What are the goals that you want to achieve as host of APEC this year?
Well, I think, first of all, we'd like to emphasize the C portion of APEC, which is cooperation. There is, of course, a tendency to think of all problems as parochial. A lot of times, this has to be the priority. But if we lack the cooperation, then we will always have the situation of very shaky economic outlook and pessimism that is, unfortunately, clouding all of us. So our focus will be, can we not concentrate on areas where we can really cooperate as opposed to the issues that separate all of us? Is it about time to really broaden the dialogue that happens with our countries? For instance, earlier today we had the Chilean state president, Madame Bachelet, as our guest. We've had the relations for 70 years, and obviously the trade between the Philippines and Chile leaves a lot to be desired. But even at this nascent stage, we have the capacity to be able to exchange best practices as far as disaster risk reduction and management of the disasters that can benefit both of our countries at this point in time. For instance, they have a lot of earthquakes, and we were told that the strongest earthquake in recorded history happened in Chile. We are both members of the Ring of Fire in the Pacific. We are both subjected to the volcanoes. They have shown success in terms of the number of casualties in the last earthquake incident they had, which was in the low teens compared to the hundreds not too far ago in 2010. We have this mantra of building back better. We're visited in turn by 20 typhoons on average every year. Subjects a lot of our communities to a lot of destruction. We rebuild in the same location, in the same manner, to subject them to the same destruction come the next typhoon. So we're trying to break that cycle and how to actually reorder society, in effect, how to move them from the danger areas like the coastal areas, how to encourage them to leave the traditional areas to areas that are now better, that will be more resilient to climate change. So again, going back, they're all interconnected. The economy gives the government the wherewithal to be able to do all of the engineering necessary to accomplish, in our case, to build back better. A stagnant economy, a pessimistic outlook on anyone's economy becomes, I guess, the key indicator that the suffering continues.
It's interesting you talk about the connections you have with a country like Chile, and certainly right now with just the second anniversary of Typhoon Yolanda, Haiyan, particularly timely. Looking at what draws APEC countries together, let's talk about trade, specifically trade at the moment. Do you hope to be able to see any announcements from this APEC regarding trade? What would you like to see the next step forward? Because there are so many different plans on the table now.
Well, of course, I think the ideal would have been that the Doha round was successful, that it was implemented. Barring failing to have achieved that, then you have to go through all of these regional free trade agreements and partnerships. Right? But at the end of the day, I was trained as a classical economist. The bigger the market, the more the opportunities, the greater the possibilities. So it doesn't behoove any country or any economy to have to build up all of these barriers towards the trade. So the direct outputs here are, we've had so many agreements of increased bilateral trade relations. You do want to see something concrete. I'm kind of mixed in terms of answering this this particular question. We have this superstition in the country that until you have I guess, initial the document, you'd rather not talk about it in case you...
Don't tempt fate.
You might jinx the possibility. But we are expecting so many different agreements on a wide variety of fronts.
Well, just on this agreement point, because As we sit here, there are, I count, at least 3 major treaties. The TPP, obviously, the Regional Cooperation or Economic Cooperation Platform, and also the the Free Trade Zone for Asia Pacific. 3 big
Yes.
deals there. Is there a danger that they could fragment trade within APEC, that you'd get rival blocs rather than all working towards a common goal? Is that something that concerns you as a key exporting country, of course?
Well, that might be a possibility if the people responsible allow it to happen. But the whole point, I think, is that our theme is inclusivity. Every country would want to be part of all of these agreements. We were not invited to TPP to begin with, but we're expecting to be invited when they do open up membership. If the whole idea is to broaden trade, making it exclusive actually defeats the whole purpose of why you enter into all of these agreements. No, I don't think we can look for any economist or any businessman who states as a goal limiting the potentials for whatever sector he works in. So I guess everybody's cognizant of this. Those who accept the reality that growth is both domestic but more proportionately international in nature will welcome the interaction amongst all of these various trade agreements, associations.
Specifically now on the Philippines, the OECD recently put out a rather grim report on the outlook for global trade. This year, I think the growth will be 2%. It's an average 6% growth global trade. So obviously it's going to be difficult. Your economy is experiencing weaker than expected growth, still strong, but weaker than expected, as are many other economies because of what's happening, obviously, with trade. How is your government offsetting that slowdown? What are you doing to deal with this slowdown in trade?
Well, first and foremost, again, the investment in our people, be it the tripling of the budget for health so that they're spared from starting from zero again with a catastrophic illness. This whole idea of the fight against global climate change, the adaptive aspects of that. The investments in education, both the formal and in the tech box sector. Most of our growth is still driven by consumption or things that we need in this country. Infrastructure, for instance, which should be 5% for GDP by next year, is something that, like a lot of emerging countries, we need a lot of. But at the same time, it's already producing the opportunities for us, for instance, in tourism, from 3 million foreign tourist arrivals to about 5 million last year already. Domestic tourism targets from 35 million we set in 2011. We actually, I think it was 34, we exceeded it already by 2011. We had to double that by next year. Now, the point, I guess, that I'm trying to raise is we lost that decade. We have so many things to do to catch up. Even our own internal economy will necessarily propel us to even greater heights just to meet our own particular needs. But at the same time, well, I should also add, manufacturing was an aspirational goal when we started. Our electricity rates are some of the highest, if not the highest, in the region. This is still a work in progress in terms of bringing them to a more reasonable level. But we've had, I think for the last 2 or 3 years, something like an average of 8% growth in the manufacturing sector, even before we have tackled that. So I guess there's so much interest in us. There are those that who used to partner with us that somehow forgot all about us that are coming back. There are those who are wondering why they never came here to begin with.
There is a sea change. You detect this real sea change. People want to be part of the Philippine story now.
Yes. And again, for instance, and it helps us, there's so many thoughts that I want to share. For instance, one of our sunrise industries is, of course, the BPO, BPM sector. They have been a key factor in broadening the development of the country away from just the purely urban areas or the traditional areas of investment. And of course, there's greater interaction between government and the private sector so that we don't work at cross purposes, so that we don't go chasing after what used to be hot but rather we want to be as proactive as possible and support each other in attaining the same goals, which is when they grow the economy, we grow our resources, we are enabled to help our people that much quicker and more fully.
So here's the question. There is no doubt that the Philippine growth story has been a very good story over your presidency. It has been one of the highlights of your presidency. I think one stat I look at is the fact that the Philippines, now 3 years in a row, has been the strongest growing economy in ASEAN. So, is this the beginning of a new normal, or is it too early to say that? Is the Philippines now on a different growth trajectory, a different growth path than it was when you took office?
Well, I guess that will be very dependent on the administration that follows us. But from the day one, we knew that we had 6 years to do what we can do. And the whole idea was get our people so used to the level of service and the efficiencies that we've managed to introduce, to raise their expectations of what government should be able to do for them, that they will make a demand of it. And I think you can see it even in the pre-campaigning that is happening now. To a large degree, all of the major contenders are saying that they will continue our policies, if not even improve on what we were able to do. And we expect them to be able to do a lot more.
But they have to work within that new government framework,
Yes.
that new administration framework,
Yeah.
right?
When we were starting out, the horror story was after all of the work that they would go back to where we were. But now I think that our people have gotten to the point that they know what government is capable of if it is run properly, and they will demand it of those who come after us.
Well, on that point, so the private sector says, yes, we will continue. What does the government, what does your successor have to guarantee to keep the Philippine growth story going in its current form?
I think America said it best, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So in some of the foreign observers, some banks, for instance, some of the ratings agencies, don't expect a major change in governance, no matter who wins. No? They say that even the political noise, which is very noisy in our country, is kind of muted and subdued at this point in time. I think in branding themselves and making a differentiation, they've had difficulty of how to question what we have done, and also at the same time how to adapt at the end point saying we are opposition, but we will do everything that they did.
So you feel confident, do you think, that this is the beginning of a long-term sea change for the Philippines economy?
Well, yes. And let me give you an example. There is an extension of our major northern highway called TPLEX. It's an acronym of several provinces it passes through. It isn't fully opened yet. But even without it being fully open, for instance, there are rises in the prices for instance, shares in the country club in Baguio, our northern capital, or the summer capital. There are businesses, restaurants, everything that caters to tourists are already being built up that were never even thought of, probably even 5 years ago. People who are, as I was telling you earlier, the tourism sector was one of the low-lying fruits that we saw. We believe that for every foreign tourist that comes to our country, a job is generated. And of course, the key activity for our government is job generation. Now, tourism has twinfold of not needing too much by way of education to be able to participate. Again, it's holistic. For instance, whale shark watching in the southern portion of Luzon already educates those who are participating in it to how to interact with the whale sharks so that they are not irritated and they leave. They help preserve the ecology. They're very conscious of ecotourism, generates jobs directly for them. So we hope that it's not just a temporary thing, but really, how should I put it, a very positive attitude that has changed what used to be apathy. Now, the infrastructure that we are building now or have built, some of them were promised to us in the 70s when I was in grade school. And it is now, There's a major irrigation project that was first thought of when I was born, you know, and now it's here. Now people are getting to see the real benefits. You know, I'm really trying to encapsulate in a sentence something to the effect that oftentimes I'm told these were things we aspired to and dreamt about and thought we'd never see.
And now they're happening.
And now it's there.
You have CEOs from around the region, from around the globe in this auditorium today. Do you have a message to them about why they should be investing in the Philippines? Because we have seen a big uptick in foreign direct investment. Obviously, there is a lot more confidence. Is there a specific message today that you would like to share? Would you like to?
You know, let me answer that in a twofold way. There are two companies, one American, one Japanese, and just to make sure I'm not violating any disclosure rules, I will not mention which companies. But basically, they told us one is already present. They already are manufacturing concerned. They're expanding their manufacturing operations here, and not trinkets, no? Very high tech micro motors, amongst other things. They said what we're interested in the next phase is to set up a research and development facility in your country. And to be able to do that, we need several hundreds in the master's and doctoral levels in engineering to be able to sustain our R&D. Do you have that? And we responded, yes, and we gave them actually the names of where these people are, etc. And they said, it so happens that we lack the necessary numbers. We have an aging population, and you have a very young population that is so capable. You know? And that prompted them to reset up this R&D. I think the memorandum of agreement was signed probably last month or the month before. No, last month. The other guy actually was watching your network and had a feature on the Philippines. And he said, why don't I look at the Philippines? So he has something like 600,000 people working in the factories that produces his goods. And he's setting up his manufacturing facility also. And also, at the same time, for us to make it complete, we also want to set up the R&D facility. And, you know, they look at us not as no longer as the source of manufacture for the cheapest labor, but rather of the skilled labor, and that there is the necessary support in terms of infrastructure, in terms of stability of power, in terms of political stability, and so on and so forth. That, you know, it is worthwhile to come here. Just the last part was, we had a conference by Forbes magazine recently, and I think it was universal the way it was reported to me by the head of the economic cluster, Secretary of Finance, that people who were here before and somehow forgot us were wondering why they forgot us. There were those who never came here and said, why did we miss this? And the third group is saying, you know, what we've done is not enough, we want to accelerate what has happened. I guess all of them were stating basically the same thing. This is the right time to invest in the Philippines, and we have already lost by not doing it earlier. So I guess the central message is, we really invite you to come in now, rather than tell us 2 or 3 years from now that you should have listened to our advice.
Could have missed the boat. Mr. President, you are just a few months now away from the end of your term. You won in a landslide. You won on a platform of tackling corruption and alleviating poverty. How do you judge the success? How do you judge the success of your term?
Well, to be perfectly honest, when we started out, we had something like less than 7% of the national budget left for us to use on priority measures or priority programs and policies. That was to run the country for 6 months. It was a hope that somehow we will get people interested to set up businesses that therefore will provide employment. I never expected, for instance, to hear, when I meet with governors, mayors, congress people, senators, it's a truism in our system that there are so many folders presented to you for various requests. Then, I think 2-3 months ago, I had a chance to talk in rapid succession 3 of our governors, one from the farthest north of the country and 2 from south, 2 from Mindanao, 1 from the Cordilleras. And all of them were saying, well, I quote the two women governors from Mindanao, they've gotten to the point that in terms of counterpart funds, they're running short already of counterpart funds because of the sheer volume of projects, programs that are being implemented. When we were hit by a typhoon called Bofa, it brought down coconut trees, which were the main source of livelihood in that community. We were wondering, we were really fearful that it takes 5 to 7 years to grow the coconuts back. What will the people there subsist on while waiting for it? And lo and behold, about a year later, the governor of that particular province says, "Sir, our current problem is inflation." I said, "Inflation?" No, from expecting a dearth of jobs. Then he said, "There's so much money and so many jobs that are happening in our community that they're chasing after the same goods and services. Therefore, inflation came about." So we never expected to get to the point that people will be saying, "We can no longer absorb any more projects from you." We've reached the physical limitations of lack of contractors, lack of sometimes even aggregates. We didn't think we'd be able to support 4.4 million households in that conditional cash transfer program. We didn't think that, well, Haiyan is still a challenge, but to be able to even rebuild these communities that affected about 20 million, actually more than 20 million for our countrymen. Now, when we started out, we think if we got something like that, we'd have to borrow to the hilt, perhaps exhaust all of our credit lines just to do something about it. But, you know, there's so many things that
so many
we can point
things.
out.
If you put it all together, this is an old journalist question, this one, but if you put it all together and you graded yourself, your performance, with 10 being perfect and 0 being a fail.
You know, that is a very difficult question to answer. If I grade myself highly, my cabinet might suddenly take a breather.
But you feel you have.
You know, the normal answer we say is that we are in the service of our people, and a delay of service or a good to them means a prolongation of their suffering. So no matter what we did, we always have to try and surpass that which was accomplished. And doing that which was at one point in time considered impossible, that is now accepted as common fare, tells us that there is the possibilities to go even further than the wildest dreams are there. So grading, I was always taught to be modest by my parents and my school, my church. So I'd rather let our people decide. And that is actually how I framed. I told our countrymen when I endorsed a candidate, I said, you know, next year will be a referendum. Did we do right by you or not? Did we fulfill our promises to you or not? And if we did, then the key to continuity is in your hands. If, on the other hand, you think all we did was wrong, then it is your right to boot all of us and those who follow our example out of office. So, like you, I would like to see the results of next year's elections. And that will be the grade. Yeah.
Absolutely. I fully understand that. You have, and you have continued throughout your leadership, pushed on corruption issues. Are you satisfied? And I guess that's the best you could hope to be with the progress you've made.
Well, we have 3 branches of government, and what I tell the executive, which I hold, is that the key to the corruption fight is not the ability to file cases against somebody, but actually sending somebody to jail.
Yes.
If we can remove this belief that you can get away literally with murder, then we will have achieved something. But, we're expecting some major decisions on cases that have been pending.
Has it been a frustrating fight for you?
Honestly, yes. The judicial process, and with all due respect to our co-equal branch of government, the Constitution, our Constitution says, for instance, once submitted for resolution, the Supreme Court has a maximum of 2 years to decide on a particular case. Now, unfortunately, when you look at the 2 years, they're the ones who start the clock as to when it becomes 2 years. So we're told about cases that have been languishing for decades in the processes. And lately, for instance, infrastructure, some of the things that we would have been able to finish were held up because of the actuations of lower courts who were not who actually were working under a law that said government infrastructure projects cannot be delayed, but actually helped in delaying the same. For instance, they are not able to give a restraining order on construction. So the new method was on valuation, questioning the valuation, effectively delaying the project so that some of the targets that we were hoping to accomplish before we stepped down will not be met. But the Supreme Court has taken action on this and reminded them that there is a law that says you are not supposed to stop the infrastructure programs of government. But it is frustrating.
It is. With hand in hand with the crackdown on corruption, of course, has been alleviation of poverty. Some of the metrics I've been looking at suggest that that needle on poverty reduction is much, much more difficult to move. And it has not moved that much over the last 5 years or so. Has there not been, am I looking at the wrong statistics, or are we still not seeing a trickle down? I know you said that you didn't want to trickle down, you want to be more aggressive than that,
yes.
but we're not seeing yet the results of 3 years of very strong growth, 4 years of strong growth, with significant poverty reduction. Why do you think that is?
Well, again, the first drive was to capacitate our countrymen. And that means investing in education from elementary to high school. The whole process now will take about 13 years. We have a K-12 program. There was a fight to get that new curriculum in place. The need also to build all of the facilities that were neglected previously. Just to give you an idea, the classrooms, my predecessor said we have no classroom shortage. And how they did that was for people in the elementary, each classroom was utilized for 2, if you're lucky, 3 shifts, and in some instances 4 shifts per day. And these are children in the elementary level being made to start their class very late in the afternoon, wind up in the evening, and compress everything inside of the day, the 8-hour day, becoming a 4-hour day, or even in some instances less. Sharing of books that were erroneous. So all of the investments need time. They have to graduate, they have to finish high school and have the skills that will impart. That's part of it. There is that national household targeting survey that we did. Their promise to me is by the end of this month we will have the results of this, and then those probably will be the metrics that you should see.
So you're pretty confident you're going to start being able to point to very significant changes.
The numbers of the people that have actually gone above the poverty line.
Yeah. Is there something, again, just on the legacy issue, if you like, what would you like to be remembered for?
Well, the idea of perhaps I was part of that drive to regain the people's confidence that led to optimism. Perhaps, hopefully, not overconfidence.
But to restore that confidence, I understand that. And in hindsight, President, and hindsight's a very easy thing. Is there something, an issue you wish you'd tackled differently or more vigorously, or do you think that you've done pretty much what you wanted to do and as effectively as you could have been given the circumstances?
Again, my stock answer is no matter what we've achieved, there's a lot more other things that could have been done.
Of course.
For instance, could I have been? I come from a country that is not known to be a tightwad, but when it comes to the people's funds, items like 1,000 pesos or 10,000 pesos, we would debate as to whether or not we should expend this amount or not. One of the first foreign trips I did, we rode on a commercial plane that left Manila at 11:45. It was a budget airline, and the seats were not adjustable in any manner whatsoever. But and I had members of the cabinet who were chief executives of our biggest corporations, used to business class travel, who suddenly said, "Please include this in your list of sacrifices." Perhaps at the point in time when the liquidity in the world was really, when especially our part of the world was awash with all of this liquidity. Perhaps we could have been even more daring and more emboldened to take on the loans that could have funded so many other things. But now that, and we have reached that capacity limits in terms of the construction, etc., early on, perhaps we could have accelerated the pace of the infrastructure support now.
Yes, the infrastructure remains an issue. I'd like to open this. I did promise the organisers that I would open the floor up to some questions to the President of the Philippines. So we still have a few minutes left. So if there is one to a question, I believe a gentleman here, if you could stand up and if you could state your name and affiliation, please. So thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. President.
Good afternoon.
I'm Paulo Montero, a Philippine delegate to the APEC Voices of the Future program. I'd just like to ask a question about trade. You mentioned earlier that the Philippines is not part of the TPP, but we would want to be a part of the TPP. However, as agreed upon by some observers, one of the major challenges to our full participation would be some restrictive provisions in some of our laws and even our constitution. Considering that 40% of global GDP is part of TPP, and I think about 5 of our major trading partners are part of the agreement, would the Philippine government be open to possibly introducing some changes to these restrictive laws or even to our constitution? Thank you very much.
There is the debate on whether or not the Constitution has to be rewritten. Of course, the idea of the economic provisions and the term limits. At this point in time in my administration, I think it's too late for me to consider any of that. And obviously, I don't want them to consider the issue of term limits. But anything made by man is open to change by man. So if it can be demonstrated that it leads to the common good or the good for most, if not all, then that is subject to review also, or can be made the subject of review.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, we do appreciate you being willing to take questions from the audience. I did see another hand up. This gentleman here. Yes, that's right. Just, excuse me, sir. Just before you do, just the gentleman in front of you had his hand up first. Yes, just there you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, President. I'm Zhong Mao from Chinese Taipei, and I'm the Voices of the Future representing Chinese Taipei. Talking about basic human rights, we all know that not only calamities, but natural disasters pose great threat to people, especially in economies like the Philippines, especially threatened by climate change. Thus, I would like to ask the President's perspective on the argument that current intended national determined contributions are not sufficient for the 2 degrees Celsius, not to mention the 1.5 degrees Celsius proposed by the Philippines.
Well, again, when we participate in COP21, the message, simply put, is we all have to do the most that we can, because this really is a situation where we're running out of time to be able to stop an irreversible situation. Now, there is no template answer for all countries. For instance, in the Philippines, we'd want to go to natural gas in terms of sourcing for our energy. But at the present time, we don't have a regasification plant. It limits our ability to go into that area. We're in the process of enticing investors and negotiating for the setting up of these plants, which won't happen under my watch. But at the end of the day, we have to look at each particular country's contribution to their eyes to be able to prod each one to contribute the maximum, as opposed to being combative and forcing everyone to accept a particular template. Coming up with that best contribution effort is the challenge, and hopefully we will be able to articulate that in a very good manner that convinces everybody to give what they can now, rather than at a more critical period down the line.
Just on that point, Mr. President, talking about climate change and Haiyan, Yolanda, 2 years ago, at the time, afterwards, there was a lot of talk about this being the new normal, these extreme weather events. And you've been speaking at the podium about building back better. Are you satisfied with how you have been able to build back? And is the Philippines now, do you consider, more resistant to this type of extreme weather events because of what you learned 2 years ago?
We're better off in a sense. We're better prepared, but are we going to say that we are very, very resilient or resistant already to this? I don't think that is the case. There is when you look at the map of the Philippines, we have something like 36,000 kilometers of coastline. Just recently, one of the typhoons that affected our country, and by coincidence, we don't have ports on the Pacific side of our coastline because that's where the storms normally come in. There was a proposal that will facilitate trade in the northern portion of the Philippines in a province called Aurora. And this was where a particular typhoon, it had a natural cove, it's supposed to be a natural shelter, etc. And even with those features, even with an island in front of it or a peninsula in front of it that shields the main municipality, they were still severely affected by this typhoon, which wasn't that strong in comparison to Haiyan. So, in terms of the response of the first responders preparing the communities, we're good. In terms of being able to get to these areas sooner and clearing the roads, repairing the lines, I think we're better. But still, the effort is so many communities on that 36,000 kilometer coastline that have to be moved to better locations. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but one of the protections that is being done is a road from Tacloban to Palo Leyte that will have on average about a 4-meter difference between the road and the mean sea level as a natural dike or a built-in dike for the communities. But because of the height, because of the length, because of the width, and also convincing all of these people to go behind the dike it's a
long process.
Still a work in progress.
Yeah.
Investments in the radars also are being installed.
Would you like to continue your work in this after your presidency, to continue to push forward on this? Is this something that interests you? Because it was a very, very confronting event.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm really looking forward to taking a small break next year.
I think you probably deserved it.
You know, we're after APEC, we're headed to ASEAN to say my goodbyes to my co-leaders. This will be my last ASEAN meeting. After which we go to COP21, difference of about 4 days or so, and I think a visit, 2 more state visits. But the major challenge before me is to ensure that our elections are credible, orderly, and peaceful. And the political noise will really be loudest after Christmas. Probably towards the end of the first week of January, it will get...
To an outsider, explain why.
Sorry?
To an outsider, explain why it will start getting very noisy then, just leading into the election.
Well, we're all friendly prior to the coming of Christ. No, there seems to be an unofficial ceasefire and Christmas is one of our biggest and most festive moments in the year. Everybody looks forward to it. The climate changes, it becomes cooler.
And then then hostilities are resumed.
Once the official campaign period starts, then everybody says anything and everything goes.
Yeah, I understand you have not made an endorsement yet, correct?
I did endorse it.
Excuse me.
President and Vice President, yes.
Right, before we go, we've got time for one more question from the floor. If there is anyone from this side of the auditorium. No, looks, and there was one gentleman over here. Looks like he's, looks
somebody.
Oh, yes, excuse me, over here. If we can get a microphone to this gentleman. Could you stand up, please, sir, so we can see you? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Miguel. I'm an Australian Filipino, and I'm part of the Australian Youth Delegation to APEC 2015. I'm part of a new generation of Australian Filipinos whose parents worked hard in their home countries to lead us into the middle class back home. But I'm rediscovering a new sense of solidarity with my homeland as a Filipino. How do you think that this newly industrialized Philippines can utilize these masses of widespread, globalized Filipino diaspora to become more diverse and holistic into the future? Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. A lot of the people that will be populating the research and development facilities that I talked to you about, a lot of them will be coming from abroad. No? And the inventory that was done, no, actually tried to pinpoint exactly where they are, what the fields are, compensation, etc. It is really a source of pride that when I do have a foreign visit, I am told all the time that the Filipino communities there are making such a valuable contribution to whichever country I do visit. Actually, I've already received a complaint from some locality that we managed to repatriate quite a number of our countrymen. They said, "Why are you taking our employees?" And we said, "I think we're taking back our citizens." So, and that has always been the goal. How to shrink the income gap between working here and working abroad, so that in addition to being with your family, you know, you're kept in this country.